back, and it is time for To the Point. Remember, earlier on we said that the conversation will be about stories of resilience and redemption, even as we think and rethink on ways of making sure that those that have been ex-convicts or ex-prisoners get to be reinstated into society. And, we ensure that the space is safe for them. And equally, we just get them into spaces where they can join in and make sure that, of course, we deal with these questions of crime and concerns that continue to bedevil us. Unfortunately, we were supposed to have Kaploti in studio, but he is not here, thanks to the rains. But we hope to get a hold of him online, joining us, of course, virtually, or perhaps via phone. I'll be introducing the other two gentlemen that will help us unpack this. But before then, let's just get to understand the concept of the conversation tonight. And we look at the graphics that speak to just what an ex-prisoner is, or an ex-convict, and perhaps what are some of the things that need to be done to ensure that once they're released out, they are able to come back to society and, find spaces that are good enough to make sure that they're better persons. And so just who is an ex-prisoner? An ex-prisoner is any person who has been released, that is from a federal, state or local correctional facility, or who has been sentenced to a term of probation by, of course, the state. And of course, that will be looking at what is the next line. Of course, there are many dehumanizing terms that could be used to describe these people that would be considered, criminal, of course, based on what the society would label them, or who have undergone these criminal justice histories. This would include offenders, delinquents, criminals, prisoners, convicts, inmates. And frequently, these labels persist even after an individual serves their entire sentence in prison and they're released back to society, which is one of the things that we want to speak about this evening. And words like ex-felons, ex-prisoners, ex-convicts, and ex-offenders are used to stigmatize these individuals, and they classify the people, of course, who have already dealt with these concerns of criminal justice system. And when speaking with those who have experienced the same, the criminal justice system, we will certainly, of course, get to find ourselves using phrases that are a bit dehumanizing, and some of them will argue that this is not so good. There's that assumption or notion, as one would argue, that sometimes when they are viewed by people in society, there's always an element of fear. There's always an element of assumption that this guy is somehow going to find himself back to prison. But then again, that is not always the case. That's the reason why I would have wished to have Kaploti, and I hope that we get a hold of him virtually so that he can share his experience having stayed out, in prison and now out of prison for ages now, a musician, and, finding it difficult to just gel into society, but at the same time managing. And there are many dehumanizing terms, as I have said. Of course, a person or individual who has previously dealt with the justice system, a person or individual who has served time in prison in the past, or who has criminal record. This, of course, are some of the phrases that would be used on these individuals that we say are perhaps not the best. What is the next one, Mr. Director? And yes, we take a look at some of the hardships that they have to go through, having come out of prison, the treatment gaps, they will tell you that sometimes they come out of, the jail probably, or from prison, and they're not in the best of shape health-wise. So what are some of the things that actually need to be done to make sure that as they are released out of custody, then their health care coverage or concerns are looked into? Some of the causes of delay, are there any in the country? Is it necessary for us to make sure that, this is addressed or not so? But away from it, lack of support. Not all inmates have access to outside support networks, as they would argue. And even those who do may not actually receive the assistance they require appropriately, as well as manage their mental health. Individuals suffering from severe mental health disorders might not know just how to treat their illnesses, or even recognize the appropriate resources to seek this kind of assistance. And so once they are released out to the world, sometimes it's pretty difficult for them to do just how they get to maneuver, how they manage to get to spaces where then they can integrate back to society as should be. Next. All right, and we still look at the questions of stigma. This perhaps could be the biggest of their problem as it stands. And this stigma does not, necessarily get to them or attack them directly. It spreads up to the level of their very own loved ones, their family members and all that. And so generally speaking, you are on your own. That is after leaving the criminal justice system. And of course, they say as a nation, we provide protections to people who are behind bars because they are regarded as vulnerable group. But we do not typically extend those protections to the people who have served their time in prison and now they are out to the world. And of course, managing their relationships, pretty much a difficult experience. I mean, having spoken to a couple of them, they say being incarcerated alters the dynamics of a family, and this making it difficult for ex-offenders to get back in touch with their loved ones. And of course, I mean, this is basically something that is even witnessed in the United States and other superpower countries, as they would argue. In the US, over half of adult inmates and parents or are parents to children of 55% underage.